Welcome everyone to our 14th annual CLC Reading Festival. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Angela Senegalia and I teach English in our adult high school program. And it has been my honor for many years to work with a group of staff and faculty and administrators to find authors who have written important or inspiring works and to invite them to the Community Learning Center to talk about their book and to inspire our students. And although COVID has caused this year's festival to look a little bit different, I think what you'll learn tonight is that we are still going to be able to hear a very powerful and a very timely message about what it means to overcome obstacles and to face challenges in your life and to be inspired. And so we have Michael here who is going to share his story, his journey to education and to writing. And I think that you're just going to find that there are going to be so many moments in this presentation where you really feel deep down inside an emotion of inspiration and confidence, and hopefully it will move you to act for others or to find resources for yourself. So without further hesitation, I'm going to introduce Michael, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Angela and Miracosta, for inviting me to your 14th annual reading festival. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to speak with you all. Just quickly about me, just to jump right in. I was born and raised mostly in San Diego. My mother is a single mother who raised my sister and I am very, very excited to be here this afternoon, be able to spend it with you all. As the story goes, from ages 7 to 17, so for about 10 years, I was a homeless youth. I've slept outside, right? Park benches, staircases. I lived in rest stops with the truckers. I've slept in public restrooms, in bushes, on the sidewalk, in tents. I've lived in shelter after shelter, mostly here in San Diego, but also along with I've coined our own underground railroad. I've experienced homelessness across the country. My mother always was searching for an opportunity, searching to find a better life. And when you are a quote unquote problem of the state, they'll give you a travel voucher and they'll send you anywhere else. And I've been to Virginia about 6 different times, right? Douglas Park, Hampton, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Portsmouth. I've been in the snow in Virginia, homeless in the snow in Virginia twice. So you can imagine my mother, disabled, young myself, my sister, pushing through the snow in California, clothes in Virginia snow weather with trash bags for miles, hoping to get to a social services office, hoping to get another voucher and get back to California. I've been homeless in Utah. I've been homeless in Arizona, Oregon, Tennessee, Arkansas, Sacramento. I've been homeless in Texas and Houston with the Katrina victims. And it was odd being there as a child because they were displaced from all their accounts. They were quote unquote normal kids who was displaced. And they're asking me, a guy who was born in San Diego, what are you doing here? You know, why are you here with us? And as a young child, I did not know. There was no answer to give. By the time I was cognizant enough to understand my surroundings and what was going on, I was a 7-year-old homeless in the streets of downtown San Diego. If you've ever experienced hunger, then you understand exactly what I mean. How it feels to starve when everyone else around you's eating, right? I mean, you have food stamps or EBT, but you get cut off randomly, sporadically, without just cause. You wish, or your parents, my mother, you want to buy food, but being a homeless, there's no way to store it, and everything's perishable. So you find yourself finding scraps or just trying to hit salad bars or hitting food lines, doing whatever you can do to get a meal. Or if you're in a shelter, by the time, it's donated food. So by the time it got to my mother, my sister, and I, whoever else was in the cafeteria, it looked like slop. The meat had merged with the carbs and everything was one amalgamation. And, we couldn't be choosers, quote unquote, because it was donation, but you see folks starting to um, get unhealthy and drop deceased. How it feels to starve when you hear about philanthropy, you hear about all the good donation and goodwill in the community for others, but when you sit back and you're looking at your mom and your sister, your fellow homeless patrons, you're hungry every night. How it feels to starve. It's like dropping a match down your throat and it hits nothing but gasoline. And every night my hunger set me on fire. And I was laughed at, humiliated, teased, all because I did not have a home. I didn't have purple skin or extra limbs. I literally lacked shelter. You see, homelessness was that noose around my neck that tightened with every step that I took. But no, it was so much more than me. I've watched homelessness separate mothers from their children and hang parents to death. I remember being in a shelter, and it's hard to make friends in the homeless community. People disappear every day. People drop deceased every day. So it's hard to form those bonds and those relationships because you'll never know from day to day. Everyone's living day to day. There's no plans for the future. There's no savings. There's no anything. It's day to day. And when we did make a connection with the family, my mother, my sister, and I, him and his two daughters. Well, one day he just passed away. He had heart problems. He had ailments much similar to my mother's, and which drew us close. And one day he just passed away in the cafeteria. The ambulance wheeled him out. His kids disappeared, went to, I assume, Child Protective Services, and his bed was filled the next day. And that was the end of that story. No one asked any questions. There weren't any memorials, just cremation. I remember being in Houston, and there was a young lady who also passed away, and her child disappeared as well. And it was a constant at an early age, seeing death at an early age definitely had an impact, an effect on me. And so, yes, I do mean homelessness hung people to death. I often wondered how long even I had left. You see, I too am a victim of the rages of society. I was on a trolley with my mother. I was on the trolley going to meet my mother. We were homeless, but we just wanted to be together. We didn't have much growing up, just the time we could share with each other. And on my way, I was on the trolley at 25th and Commercial, if anyone's familiar with that area. And about 5 adults saw me destitute. They saw me desolate, my clothes 2 sizes too big, holes in my shoes. They saw that I was fodder, and they did not need a reason. And so before I knew it, I had a punch coming this way. I had a punch coming this way, um, really strong haymaker punches, and it knocked me between the trolley stalls. And by the time I figured out what was happening, there was kicks coming at my head. I tried to cover up, and they moved my arms to really get in there, really upset. for whatever reason, and then one kick too many, and I went unconscious. I woke up with police officers under both arms, blood all over my clothes. It was so much blood. Someone called the police and said someone's been shot. There's blood everywhere, and I'm being drug off the trolley, waking up, understand, trying to figure out what's happening. I get slammed on the bench at the trolley station. My assailant's nowhere to be found. I have guns everywhere drawn on me. I'm staring down the barrel. My hands are up. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I was having trouble processing thoughts. I couldn't think. And if anyone had a concussion, you understand what I mean, where you can't really form sentences. You can't get through that fog in your head. And it was the first time it happened to me in that degree. And the lack of urgency from the police officers. I mean, I had 3 fractures cracked open into my face. My eye was caved in. They said I may need surgery. I had bruised ribs and severe concussion where it took me a while to regain my memory. And the police said, hey, he's probably some gangbanger, some gangster, and they refused to call the ambulance. They refused to get me to the hospital. And so when my mother eventually found me, because it was a scene, there was people around me, and I'm still bloody and bleeding on the street. I was bloody and bleeding up on the same streets in which I normally sleep. And so by the time my mother gets to me, she rushes me to the hospital, confused at the officers of why aren't you helping my son? We get to the hospital, and now the doctors are asking me, hey, is your mother abusing you? You're safe here? And they separate me and my mother for a couple of more hours, right? Trying to get through that hurdle. And I'm wondering what's going on. I barely recognized my mom when she picked me up. And then when you get discharged from the hospital, you're still homeless, right? I mean, none of your problems stopped. It was exacerbated. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't play sports. I couldn't run. I could barely walk. And I was that way for weeks, but I was still in shelters. I was still in a car. I was still at times unaccompanied. Just because I happened to be in the inner city. You see, homelessness places folks onto the street, but what many do not correlate is the street. The streets are where many gangsters and criminals congregate. And so my friends and a lot of relatives were also caught up in that cycle. They didn't understand. They always asked me, hey, how come you're not selling drugs? You need to be selling drugs the most. How come you aren't, being a gangster for safety? Because gangs are kind of like a fraternity or work in college, right? Or a 4-year college. It's the safest way to navigate these social issues. And if you find yourself wanting more in your life like I did, you fall victim to everyone. The shootings, the violence. I lost so many friends, and I never chose to be on the streets, right? I was just there, and they couldn't understand, why aren't you throwing your life away? I'm like, I'm just trying to build. And you become ostracized, you become isolated, or quote unquote a square or lame, and they tease you, and you become a victim of bullying, a victim of folks putting you down. But I knew criminality wasn't the way to go. My father, he's been incarcerated my entire life. I saw him one time when I was 12, inside prison, and that was it. His father was murdered in prison, right? His brother, my father, my grandfather, my great uncle, he was almost killed in prison. My dad's dad was also murdered. So there's a whole line of tragedy and of murder, and I just wanted to try something new. I figured that may not be the way to go. If I was factoring in the history of my family, maybe I should try something new. Because if I stay in these streets, if I stay just a homeless person, a homeless child, the inner city, this culture, they will kill me out here because I don't fit in. But where do I fit in? Uh, where can I go? Maybe I should try upward mobility through education. And so that was my goal. And when I pursued higher education, I faced another set of circumstances, right? Because now all they said was is, hey, you don't belong here. You know, bettering your life, pursuing college, pursuing a dream, a better life, the American dream, is not meant for your kind. You know, I said I, I wanted to succeed and exceed the expectations of those in need. You know, I did not want to perpetuate the plight of impoverished people. But I didn't have an educator instilling trust into me. You know, my educators, my counselors, anyone around me said, succeed. Michael, can't you tell? You're already homeless. You've already failed. Matter of fact, you'll probably end up like your father doing life in jail. Well, I didn't like that story. You see, yes, I was homeless, but I didn't see why that should define me. It wasn't my, it's not my character, it was my circumstance. And I'm trying to figure out and navigate the system. Okay, in the inner city, they ostracize me and say, you don't belong here for wanting to pursue a higher education and not pursuing criminality. But on the other side of the veil, you have them saying the hood is exactly where you belong. Homelessness is exactly what you deserve. And this other life is not meant for you. And I couldn't understand why. And there was no one to talk to. I didn't have any mentors. I didn't have anybody to kind of lean on. They told me that there are no excuses. There are no excuses. And so I realized that if I wanted to first survive, right? Because when you're homeless, right, that's life below the poverty line. You have to become poor, right? When you're homeless, you have to become poor and then become low middle class and hopefully anything beyond that. And I had to figure out, okay, well, how do I at least become poor? Because there was no one with any bank accounts. There was no one with anything, like literally zero. We didn't have anything. So how do I navigate that system? And I'm still here. I'm still homeless with my mind trying to expand. My body is still subject to being attacked every night just before existing. Understanding that there was an education gap I had to overcome. And so I decided that instead of giving excuses, instead of saying of how unfair this is for me, that I would just put my head down and give them no excuse. Right? You know, I had to do my homework under street lamps, you know, at 12 in the morning, 1 in the morning, really trying to get it done. Right. I didn't have access to electricity back then. And the only time I saw computers when I got to go to the library where many homeless kids congregated at the time. And so I remember one time specifically having to handwrite an essay. I stayed up all night handwriting an essay. My citations were about a 10 page paper, not counting your citations. And my teacher balled it up in my face and he threw it at me. He said, I wanted this tight. I don't care about your plight. I don't care about your homelessness. No one said education would be easy. And I failed that assignment. I realized that somehow, some way, I would have to persist. Um, and so I persisted. My first job actually was at SeaWorld at being 14. I realized my mother, she had just came out the hospital. My mother's had 5 surgeries. She's flatlined twice. And she's lost so much blood in other ones. So the fact we didn't know the outcome of her surgeries each time, it was scary. Like, is this the last time seeing my mother? or how can we even go visit her in the hospital unless we walk endless miles? So I got a first job at SeaWorld at 14, and just working for pennies on a dollar, but hopefully trying to get a bus pass or get food for my sister and somehow find my mother. That hard work stayed with me. And at 16, there was an opportunity to join a program that was paying low income students funds, summer funds, so we can work, and make some income. And as I was already homeless, the only job that made sense that was available was to be a custodian. One, it had the most hours, and two, no one else wanted to do it. And it was either that or gamble with a chance of not working. And I knew that this was the moment in my life that was going to make or break me. I was getting too old to go back to shelters, right? You age out at 12. I was getting too old to do much in the homeless world besides fail. So I took the job as a custodian, and even worse, it was for my own high school. So you can imagine my self-esteem at the time, right? I'm already a homeless kid. I've already been beaten and bruised, and now all of my peers can see me on my hands and knees in a boys' bathroom, wiping up smeared feces from off the walls. I'm cleaning graffiti. Urine is everywhere except the toilet. And I always say, yeah, that was just the boys' bathroom. I can't begin to describe the things I saw in the ladies' restroom. I was definitely too young at the time and may have been a little traumatized even still. But they saw you grabbing trash bags and they rip and they spill all over your jeans. And the fun fact about milk on your jeans while you're living in the car is that there's no really place to wash them. And so you have to hang them up over the roof, and hopefully no one takes it. And I've had times where, my clothes were gone, but that was the nature of the game. It was very embarrassing, scraping gum off the ground. You'll never see me spit gum on the ground anywhere. Scraping gum, being called names. And for my whole life, historically, I wondered, why don't people like me? Like, what are folks like me? Why? What did we do besides exist? It's like, imagine waking up one day and you realize everyone, quote unquote, hates you or doesn't understand you for something that you had no control over, right? But again, I gave them no excuse. So I took the scrapes, I took the bruises, I was called the names, but I knew I had a goal in mind. And that was to get quarters for laundry, to get food, to help my mom. And I knew that hard work would pay off. It always does, and hard work always will. And at the age of 17, I was able to move my family out of our breaking down car and into our first apartment in years, successfully ending our homeless streak. But I understood that the goal was to never become homeless again. There's a cycle called chronic homelessness where folks will, get an apartment for 3 months or stay with a friend for a couple of months because of the lack of resources. There's a common misconception that the lack of money makes someone homeless, right? Um, but it's not the lack of money, it's not the lack of effort, but it's the lack of resources that makes someone homeless. And I wanted to figure out how I could build upon my resources so we would never fall into this trap again. We were lucky to escape after 10 years. Again, there were so many that were far, far less fortunate than my family. So I wrote an essay explaining to my caseworker how these funds helped really change my life. I know it was hard, but I really appreciate the opportunity, the teaching me how to fish so I can advance our life. And I was able to read that essay on the USS Midway. And so a guy by the name of Mark Cafferty, he came and asked me, so, what's next? How are you going to pay next month's rent? I mean, this program's ending. are you going to be homeless again? And I said, I'm just trying to enjoy the moment. I'm just trying to wipe my brow. And but he really took me in to a local workforce investment board called the San Diego Workforce Partnership. And there I had a communications internship with Rebecca Smith and my late mentor Nathaniel Buggs, which put some income in my pocket in high school, and also let me pay rent, help me with the electricity bill, things I've never experienced before. But I also understood that the key to upward mobility was education. But as the first one to get a regular diploma in the history of my family on both sides, I just didn't know how to do that. I just didn't know how to navigate the system of higher education, not a community college, not a four-year university, not a vocational school, especially since my entire life, they told me I did not deserve to go because I was born where I was born. So San Diego Workforce Partnership was on the fourth floor, and as luck would have it, a college prep organization named Reality Changers was on the third floor. And so I was introduced to its founder, Chris Yanoff, telling him some of my history, what I've been through, and my dream of, going to college and just trying to alter my life. And Chris connected me to an amazing tutor named Debbie Leto, who really helped me just figure out what to do. She had answers. And for the first time in my life, it was really weird asking a question, hey, how do I pull up this application? Where do these applications come from? Oh, this is what you do. And not just me, other kids, other teens in similar situations. Debbie, her daughter, Allie, support from her husband, Nick, and many great tutors really congregated around folks like myself and really helped us navigate that process step by step. And I realized without this help, I would have never had an opportunity. It was mentors like Debbie who, when I was applying to school, we would storm campuses like USD, and knock down doors. And I had never had that support in my life where someone who said, hey, I really want you to do well. It was new to me at the time. Um, really that support, and through her support, through the support of the organization and good folks, I was able to garner a $100,000 scholarship to UCLA. Go Bruins! I'm a proud Bruin. This is me on graduation day. One of the most one of the most um, remarkable days of my life. I always believe education and literacy could be replicated by anyone. I always believe that it would be the key to me changing my life. And without education and literacy, I probably would be still a homeless person, or more likely, just like so many of my friends and folks I met along the way. But I don't want everyone to get too tied up in just work. We definitely have to make time to enjoy the moment. We're all on a journey, and to enjoy that journey. And so I was able to do some cool things at UCLA. So this image is to my left is my sophomore year. I was able to get on the cover of the yearbook, which was pretty cool at the time, especially for being a few years, a year prior to that, I was a homeless kid in San Diego, and to be at UCLA where it was so safe, the streets were decorated, it was safe. I couldn't get over the level of safety around me. I was hyper vigilant, right? I'm jumpy everywhere, just being from the world I was from, and being at a place that really gave me an opportunity to flourish and find myself. This picture was imaged after American Next Top Model when Tyra Banks was doing it. And so the girl in the middle is supposed to be Tyra, and I'm in the front sitting down with the tie and a blue shirt on, and other folks around me. To my right is a photo with actually all the men you see in the photo around Kendrick was part of my admin weekend at UCLA. a good group of guys, and we got to meet, rappers such as Kendrick Lamar, or people like Russell Westbrook, or folks who I never even dreamed I could be exposed to, just from education or just for trying to pursue your dreams. And it also gave me the chance to go to Spain and London and studying abroad in Granada, going to Barcelona, and really traveling. I never thought in my wildest dreams, if you asked me at 16, would you ever be in Spain somewhere? I would have laughed. If you had asked me, hey, do you think you'll go to college when I was 14? I would have probably cried. Like they say I couldn't. And just being exposed to this opportunity, and that's why I encourage all you students to continue along your process of education, because it will pay off, and enjoy the moment along the way, because you'll never know where the meandering road goes. So I always say the hardest feat I ever accomplished was, um, overcoming homelessness. The second hardest feat was writing about it, right? I mean, each time I tell the story, I relive the memories, right? It's not just a story. I relive even mostly the grim parts that didn't make the manuscript, or, calling my mom, because it's not just my story, it's our story. And so hearing my mom cry over again, hearing my mom relive the memories of her surgeries, and her almost dying, and my sister reliving, her domestic violence or attempted, assaults by, not so good people, and all the ugly stuff that happens in this world that, we couldn't really write about, reliving it every single time. It was the hardest part about it. But not only that, and this is for you, those writing in your life, writing stories class. It's about the structure, right? Because writing the story is one part of it, but then I had a year of edits, right? 16 rounds of edits, from line edits to content editing. And it took a year just going over and over and over that due diligence, that character that you build, overcoming, it still plays a part in every aspect of your life, that drive. And so from journaling, from just putting my heart and soul on a paper, I was able to summarize it in my debut memoir. Some of the obstacles I faced, and I know many of you can relate, such as hunger, the constant starvation, the constant seeing high rises and seeing luxurious restaurants, and knowing that you're starving, the transients, right? It's constantly on the move, a ghost. I mean, we weren't counted on the census until I was 17 years old. We no bank accounts, no trace of us in and out of schools. We basically did not exist. Like, we weren't counted on the census until I was 17. The extreme poverty levels, living below poverty. Again, when you're homelessness, you have to work to become poor. And that was something that stuck with me always, as well as the shame and the embarrassment, growing up as a kid. Everyone can start to point you out after a while. Hey, your ribs are showing, hey, is everything okay at home? What home, it's what's going on, and not so much in a good light either. You see, the fickle nature of adolescence is that kids can be cruel, and so having them tease you and mock you, or put your circumstance out for everyone to make fun of, for whatever reason. Again, I don't harbor any ill will towards anyone. um, I just try to learn and to grow, and I understand that everyone has their own problems they're dealing with at home. But some of the shame of just being that homeless boy, right? Everywhere you go, here comes the homeless people, where they walk around you, you know, or the lack of opportunity, right? The not having any resources. Um, Again, the money does not make you homeless. The lack of money, the lack of effort doesn't make you homeless. Because people are trying. I watched my mother try for 10 years in 100 different states. It's not the effort, it's the resources. Someone has to reach down and give you a chance, give you help. No one can do it on their own. And the lack of education, a lot of this is generational. My mom didn't have their best education or the best life, suffering from abuse her whole life. So nor did her mom, and her mom was an immigrant, and so on and so forth. And so those family ties, those resources, those lack of education really plays a part in the cycle that not only me, but I'm sure that so many others feel. And sometimes folks don't want to leave their family and pursue education because they feel like I have to work now, I have to help them now. But trust me when I tell you, helping them in the long run will be by pursuing your education, because then you can give back and help stabilize your family. But some of these motifs or themes that I felt, that I know that many of you may feel as well. There's a chapter in my story called Home is Where the Heart Is. If you read that story, I depict living in a car, trying to go to school while I'm living in a car, my mother trying to go to work, and some of the problems we face. And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. And so here's the actual picture from my mother and I living in a car. We got a cell phone. Someone donated. It was really small, cheap cell phone. But that's the only way shelters can get in contact with you. And if you miss that call, if they can't find you after 3 days, you're just off the list. And so I remember I looked over that night, like, "Hey, mom, what are you doing?" She was taking a picture from one of her friends. Had asked how we were doing. Like, "Mom, why would you want to encapsulate this image? Us at our lowest moment. I mean, if you can see it, that back seat, that was everything we ever owned at the time. All of our worldly possessions, everything in our life was in that back seat. You can see my hand up. I have a hat on because we had to park in front of a street lamp because it was the safest place. And I was too old to go in the shelter that was right there. So we had to park behind the shelter. We put newspapers up because folks would come by and rock the car or pop a tire or throw bricks through the window or rocks through the window or whatever the case may be. Or, kids walking by laughing or pouring juice on or milk on the mirror, since it was school. Milk was a big one, was a big one. And I asked my mom, like, why would you do it? Why would you capture this point in time? And she said, son, so you can never forget. So you'll never forget where you come from. So you'll always look back and be able to see the road that you've walked down, and I keep this picture with me everywhere. Through the emails, through it, I keep this picture with me everywhere. So I'll never forget. And she was right. I never forgot. I can still feel it, like I can still feel how cold it was outside. I don't think trauma like that ever really goes away. I can still feel how hungry I was. I still remember my mother sitting on a bus because she had had a surgery, but we were still homeless, and she had her her staple split open, and her blood was running out, her entrails were running out, and the smell was so bad that they kicked us off of the bus. And we're like, what do we do now? Because we were only riding the bus until they stopped running, so we could only be homeless for not that long, right? Or just out in the open for not that long. Because being older, my mother would go somewhere, my sister would go to a women's shelter, and I would just be unaccompanied for most of my teenage years, just trying to figure it out. And so we took this picture so we can never, ever forget where we came from. There are levels to homelessness. Most folks only see that vagabond swearing on the street. 40% of families that often go unnoticed, like our family, right? The domestic violence survivors aren't really talked about. The women and men who are brave enough to leave their home, but there's no options for them. They end up unhoused with us. Unaccompanied minors, contrary to popular belief, aren't just suburbanites throwing a tantrum, leaving home, but folks without parents, folks with real trauma and tragedy that are, 13, 14, 15, really out and really unsheltered veterans who served our country and lost their legs or their arm, and there was no help for them coming back, who are suffering from PTSD. The disabled and the elderly make up a large population of the homeless population. So many elderly, so many disabled who just want to survive. The foster care children, the homeless care children are interchangeable, often going through both systems possibly at the same time. They're often, all of these folks off these levels are often invisible, shadowed by an amalgamation umbrella of the homeless, of that guy who's just swearing on the corner, when the truth of the matter is he is the minority, right? And he might not even be homeless. The true homeless, the people who I saw are the kindergartners coming out of tents, or the young kids without meals. That's who I saw. But I also believe homelessness, to beat it, it's made me tough, and to overcome, I feel that you have to be tough, or you have to be resilient. But how does one become resilient? And I can easily say, hey, I was resilient. It was just why I was able to get out of my homeless situation. But how does that help? If someone's searching through their own respective issues, how do you draw out that toughness? Well, I consider the formula called the R formula. And R, we're going to solve for R. And R is the ability to overcome great hindrances to achieve your goals, right? Remember, it's PEMDAS, right? So parentheses come first. And so acceptance and healing. I had to accept that I was a homeless boy, right? And no fault to me, to you, I was homeless. There was no point in denying it. No, did not have money. No, I wasn't that super cool athlete. I was a homeless guy on the streets and in the shelter. And that's the truth. There was no point of denying the truth. And once you accept the truth, now you can heal from it, right? Okay, now here comes the healing part of it, right? Because most people have that Superman motif where I just have to bludgeon through. I just have to go, go, go. I can withstand anything. And the problem with that Superman ideology is, once your respective kryptonite comes, whether it's homelessness or domestic violence or child abuse or a language barrier, whatever that is, your kryptonite, it will break you and it destroy you. I rather people have that Wolverine motif, and I know that my inner geek is definitely showing, but I rather folks have that Wolverine motif where you take the bumps and the bruises, the scrapes, and you heal from it, and you don't harbor that hate in your heart, and you really accept your situation and heal from the damage it's done. And so once you learn how to heal and accept, now we have to take an introspective look at the situation, right? What caused me to be homeless, right? Obviously, it wasn't just money. Was it that my mother's parents were split and impoverished? Was it that my father, what was those lack of resources? I needed a true understanding of myself and of my situation. And once you have that understanding of what happened and what led you to be where you are, now you have to adapt to your environment, adapt to survive. If it's a language barrier, what do you have to do to adapt to get around that? You understand it's a language barrier, you understand why, how can you adapt and get around that, right? And once you do, you multiply that introspection and adaptation times your initiative, times your ambition, right? Because once you heal from that trauma, right, all that anger turns into something else, right? All that hurt, it turns into fuel that drives your initiative and your ambition. You multiply that initiative times your introspection and adaptation, plus healing and acceptance. No matter what happens to you, you will be able to heal from it, and you will be able to endure, and you will be able to adapt and continue. And once you plug in your respective circumstance to the formula, you'll learn how to become even tougher, right? Then to resilient, to even be here after those obstacles It's a monumental feat. But once you learn, you'll learn how to heal, you learn how to be tough, and you will recover from any trauma or obstacle that comes your way. It'll never be enough to derail you. And you will be able to overcome great hindrances and achieve your goals, whatever they may be. I just wanted to leave that with you all. If you were anyone out there was wondering how can they persist, this is what I use to help me out of homelessness, and I hope that anyone can take anything from this and break their cycle as well. Are there any questions?
So we do have some questions. As a reminder to students, if you would like to be able to ask a question, go ahead and type it into the Q&A, and we'll take the time to unmute you and let you speak to Michael. Before we do that, again, Michael, I've expressed my gratitude many times today, but it's so deeply felt. We're so thankful that you're here today sharing such a raw, personal, and inspiring story and a lived experience that I think a lot of our students can really relate to. I'd like to ask Barb Whitesides. Barb, if you'd like to ask your question, we can unmute you and you can ask Michael the question that you typed into the chat.
Can you hear me now, Michael?
Yes,
We
I
can
can
hear
hear
you
you.
now.
Hi, Michael. How you doing?
I'm well, and yourself?
Good. You are such an inspiration. I just want to thank you for being here tonight. I just have so much. I'm just so honored by it, and I feel that I'm so moved by everything you've had to say. And I just want to thank you. This must have been very, very difficult for you to do this. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, no worries. I say if there's an ear, for anyone, I'll speak to anyone. If it could, it's difficult every time, reliving those memories. But if I can just help anyone understand that they're not alone in their struggle, it makes it worthwhile.
Well, interestingly enough, I think what happens is that over the years, and we all run across people who are homeless, whether it's in a grocery store parking lot or on an exit on the freeway. We create our own stories about what that's all about.
Right.
I spent 30 years in media, and I think media has so much power, but does a big disservice to what's really happening in the world in many ways. I spoke to many homeless people as part of different interviews and stories that I covered. And one of the things that astounded me, I think, is because I think I always felt your story and felt like that most people that were on the streets really didn't want to be there. I was shocked when I talked to a couple of people who said that this is what they would prefer, where they would prefer to be is on the streets. And I was confused by that. Can you in any way understand that and explain what that means?
Yes, totally. And it's actually not too uncommon, really. I mean, you have to think that those folks. So you have a homeless person. In order to get services such as a shelter, it's almost as if it's curfew. You have
Wow, you are really breaking up, Michael. I hope that can be fixed.
Yeah, Michael, we're having a hard time with our connection. I'm not sure.
As if you're already a prisoner, you're treated as if time went to a juvenile cycle. Many folks will just stay on. Can you?
Let's see if we can get Michael. It looks like maybe he was having a little bit of internet trouble, so we'll give him just a second to come back. Barb, I want to thank you for your question, and hopefully he'll have the opportunity to come back.
I'm really very interested in what he has to say about this. This is, I think that we deal with a lot of misinformation about what's happening on the streets. And this is just,
Can you hear me? Sorry.
yeah, I can hear you, Michael.
Can we, Nora or Maria, could we get him repinned? And hopefully we can hear him a little better.
Angela, I don't.
Michael, can you hear us? Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get him back on here. And I do want him to have a chance to answer that question if he comes. As we're waiting, I want to remind those of you who are a part of our non-credit programs that we do have a couple activities that we put together to support our reading festival. We normally have student activities where they come into a community space and they get to experience some different activities. So we are doing what we're calling a passport activity, and there's an opportunity for students or community members to participate in that and win a copy of Michael's book with his autograph or one of our reading festival posters. So for those that are interested, before we leave here today at 8:30, I will put the link to that activity in the chat, and you will have the opportunity to enter yourself into the raffle if you'd like to. Michael's book is also available on Amazon, and there's also an audio book version, an audio version of his story where he reads. And so if that's something that you're interested in, let's see, Michael, were we able to get you back? Can you hear us? We can see your screen again. It looks like we might be having some internet connection issues. Great, you're back. Did you move to a different spot? Or maybe get, there we go. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I just left. I'm using a different computer. Sorry about that, everyone.
No, that's okay. Would you like to take a second to just answer Barb's question about maybe perceptions or actualities of some homeless who might prefer to be out on the street?
Yeah, just to chime back in onto what I was saying. Let me put this one up. I'm using my Mac now. So, hey, Monica, shout out to Monica, my coworker. We both work at People Assisting the Homeless, San Diego. And we both can, and she can attest to this too, is that some folks just don't want to be inside because of the rules, because it's so different, because they have to follow so many rules. And some folks feel that prison. If anyone who has experienced any part of the type of incarceration or just being around and visiting jail, you understand that's not a place people want to go. And a lot of people receive violations for illegal lodging or illegal camping. And so they don't want to be reminded of that. And so when you go to a show, like, okay, this is like prison, I would rather fend for myself.
Thank you for that, Michael. Nora, we also have you with a couple of questions. Would you like to be unmuted and ask Michael a question? We could get Nora unmuted. There you go. Nora, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Nora, we can't hear you. Do you know how to unmute so that you can ask your question?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Thank you. Most of the questions that I was writing as I was listening to the story, he's covered fairly well. Was there any particular parts you mentioned a lot of cities that you were in different places where you felt the treatment was better or you felt safer or that people were kinder to you?
As far as like along my Underground Railroad of homelessness, I find that no one really treated you better, but services were better in different places. For example, like in Houston, it was a lot easier to get into a shelter. We got actually into a shelter our first day there. We were literally our first day in Houston. We were dropped off at the social services office, right? Like, well, why are we even here? But we got services really quick versus maybe like or San Diego. It's a lot tougher to access services or be referred place. It's a process. In Virginia, it was a lot. It was kind of like Texas too. It was easier to get in a shelter.
I imagine the weather has a lot to do wherever you are.
So,
Harsher weather is much harder to be there.
hey, Natty, how are you? Thank you, Nora.
Thank you for your question, Nora. Can we have Mia unmuted? And Mia, would you like to ask a question? I'm sorry, there's two Mias. Mia Scavone?
Hi.
Yeah.
My question was asking about if you are writing at this time and a little bit about your future goals and what you're thinking about.
Yes, I am actually. Great question. I'm keeping it a little secret-ish until it's done. But me and my publisher are working on a picture book, right? That's one segment. Early readers is something as a demographic I have to touch, and if we can, kind of change the perception of homelessness to the younger generation, they'll grow up with different ideology about it. And my goals are to, working in homeless services. I've been in homeless services since I've been an adult. I'm really just trying to make a difference. I don't think it should be this hard. As hard as it was for me and my family, I'm doing everything I can to make it easy. Whether it's advocacy, trying to talk about their plight, whether it's just, hey, here's a bus pass, or whether it's me going out on my own with Subway sandwiches, like here's a meal and some gift cards. Some of my goals for the future is to write, to not only tell a story of homelessness, but just I have some creative projects as well, and just kind of expand my craft and hopefully touch different aspects of society through the written word.
Great question. We have a question from Isha. Isha? We have your Isha. You just have to unmute yourself so we can hear your question. Isha, do you know how to use the unmute? Can you click down at the bottom so we can hear you? We aren't able to hear your question.
Technology is crazy.
That's right. Just when I think I've got the hang of it. There we go. Isha, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. First of all, Michael, congratulations. You're made me cry so many times when I was reading your book. I don't know. I'm a person that really feels what the other have, and it was difficult. Your book. I was picture you like a kind of teenager, and now to see you growing up, it's like I didn't imagine that you were like that. But my question is, did you have PTSD?
Mm. I would say at least a form. Actually, I have high anxiety for sure, even now. Maybe not so much PTSD. I believe when I first got off the streets, I had more so had PTSD. Now it's just high anxiety. That jumpiness is still here. You learn how to survive for so long. You see, like I saw about 15 deaths from the time I was just like 14 to 15, right? Just seeing dead bodies so frequently, it does something to you. You're talking to one day, they're dead, the next day it's so disheartening. It's sad. So it definitely has numbed me for sure, and it's given me high anxiety. But I could say I may have a low gradient of PTSD, because this stuff, it never goes away. You think it gets better with time, but it's still there. And always at the back of my head is like, what do I have to do? I always have to make sure I'm doing like something, working or doing something, because I've told myself I'll never be homeless again, So it's that constant fear too, of going back to the streets. I know that I've progressed still in my head, I can't shake it.
Thank you, Michael. So I want to be respectful of time. It's about 8:33. So if you are joining us tonight and you need to sign off, or you've got kids to put to bed or other people that you care for, please, it won't hurt our feelings if you can't stay. For those of you who remain, I do want to fit in one last question. One of our instructors, Zakia, thank you to her for her support of our group and for the work that she does on the Reading Festival, and for her students that she always brings faithfully to these events. Both she and Ruth Gay had a question that was very similar from her students. And a lot of students are wondering, what can they do? Can you give them some examples of opportunities that they have in their own lives or in their own communities to help positively impact the homelessness problem that we have? What kind of things can they get involved in, or what kinds of things can they do in their community to really help out?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I always advise, having some type of easily accessible pantry, whether it's like a school pantry, or a church pantry, a community pantry, that folks know they can go and get non-perishable foods at, utensils as well, like a can opener. The most frustrating thing is to have a can of food and no can opener. I always, gift cards for laundry. That's a big one, right? Because a lot of folks have dirty clothes. They don't want dirty clothes, but they can't afford to wash them. I always advise giving against giving money. It's real political. People question the motives or where the money is going. So I always advise giving gift cards to, it doesn't have to be, crazy. It could be nominal, like $5, $15 to Subway, Walmart. Pet food is big too. You'll be surprised how many emotional animals is out there, and rightfully so, but they have to eat as well. I think that's a big one for sure. Just giving someone a voice to talk to, express themselves. Through time, you can kind of see who's homeless, especially if it's a kid. You might not be able to see right away, but you can see eventually, and just checking in with them in a discreet way, right? Because especially kids, it's so sensitive. They want to keep up with their peers, and despite the fact that they may be experiencing some food insecurity or are just unsheltered. So just checking in on folks. I often felt a lot of times I was just alone. It's that loneliness factor. So you can be a friend, right? If you just be a friend and give that voice out, because no homeless story is the same. Everyone had different resources depriving them, which led them here. And just giving them light and awareness to that story and understanding, or just spreading the word that, hey, these are people. They feel just as you feel. Like this and this is all the same. They just need resources. So I know everyone wants to save the world, but I do think it's important to start in our own backyards with these. They may seem like small steps, but it's monumental. Another big one, honestly, is to, when you volunteer, to not only just volunteer during the holidays, right? And consistently volunteer, not for you, but for them. And that's a distinguish we have to kind of find ourselves, right? But folks can see what's genuine and what's not, right? And we know that there's an influx of goodwill on the holidays, and then once those holidays are over, it's back to the streets. We can just keep that goodwill flowing. That will go a long way.
Thank you, Michael. Those are such great examples. And I think it's so important for us to remember that learning about this topic, learning about the hardships of the humans living in and around us is really important, because while we may be experiencing some of those things, it's really important for us to know about these resources so that we can help others and find, as Michael said, small ways to really make a big impact in a person's life. A meal can go a long way. And so thank you, Michael, for sharing with us. I want to say a couple of things. There were some questions about your next book. It seems like everyone's really excited about that. So I hope to see you do that. I want to make sure everyone knows that Michael does have a website that you can visit and you can learn more about projects that he's doing or get into contact with him if you feel very inspired by him. And I also want to remind everybody, those of you who are members of MiraCosta College, either as a student or a faculty member or administrator or a staff member, that MiraCosta has a lot of resources. We work really hard to make sure that we're connecting students to resources within our campus and also outside in the community. So there are a lot of beautiful organizations in and around us, Brother Benno's and other places where you can go and donate clothing or volunteer, as Michael said, and to just show those around us that we care about what they're going through, and we care to give our time to help people find the resistance and the resilience to change their situation. So I want to say thank you to Michael and thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening. We're blessed and honored. We are hopeful that someday when we can get back on campus, we can bring Michael back and have a big party and celebrate him and tell him all the tiny ways that we made a big difference in our community. So please stay in touch with us. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight to everyone. We appreciate you being here. Thank you, Michael. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a great night. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you.